The fluorescent lights above Bay 7 buzz with that electric hum that never stops. The kind that drills into your skull after hour 12 of a shift. My hands are steady as I press the stethoscope against pale skin, but what I hear makes every muscle in my body tighten. Nothing. No bowel sounds. Complete silence where there should be the gentle rumble of digestion, of life continuing its ordinary work. The woman on the gurney is 34 years old. Her lips have gone from pink to a dusky blue-gray in the 8 minutes since she arrived. Her name is Sarah Hendricks, and her abdomen is distended, tight as a drum beneath my examining fingers. When I press down gently on her lower right quadrant, she doesn't even flinch. She should be screaming. "Dr. Coleman," the nurse beside me whispers. Her name tag reads Ramirez. She's been here longer than I've been alive. Her eyes meet mine, and I see the same thing I'm feeling. This woman is dying right in front of us. But her husband is in the hallway, on his phone with their insurance company, arguing about pre-authorization codes. "We need to move," I say, my voice lower than I intend. "Now." Sarah's eyes flutter open. They're hazel, I notice, flecked with gold. Beautiful eyes that are staring at nothing, pupils blown wide, despite the harsh overhead lights. Her hand twitches, fingers reaching for something that isn't there. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" I lean closer, projecting my voice through the fog of whatever is shutting her body down. "Sarah, I need you to stay with me." No response. Just that terrible, absent stare. The monitor above her head shows a heart rate of 134, blood pressure 78/52 and dropping, respiratory rate 28, shallow and rapid. Her body is compensating, trying desperately to maintain perfusion to her vital organs, but it's fighting a losing battle. I grab the ultrasound probe from the cart, squeeze the cold gel onto her abdomen. The screen flickers to life as I press the transducer below her rib cage, angling for a view of her belly. What I see makes my breath catch. Free fluid, lots of it, dark and swirling in Morrison's pouch, pooling around her liver, her spleen, blood. Liters of it, collecting where it should never be. "Jesus," Ramirez breathes beside me. Through the glass partition, I can see Mr. Hendricks pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing emphatically. He's wearing a polo shirt with a company logo I don't recognize. His face is red, not from panic but from frustration. I can't hear his words, but I can read his body language. He's angry at being inconvenienced. Sarah's blood pressure drops to 72/48. "Get Dr. Patel," I say to Ramirez, my voice sharper than I mean it to be. "Tell her we need surgery now, and call the blood bank. We're going to need O negative at least 6 units to start." But what I don't say, what I'm thinking as I watch Sarah's oxygen saturation tick down to 89%, is this: what he uncovered in that hallway conversation wasn't just bureaucratic red tape. It was a choice, a decision about what a human life is worth when measured against a deductible, a copay, a pre-existing condition clause buried in fine print. And I had less than 10 minutes to make him understand that his wife wasn't going to survive long enough to get approval. 6 hours earlier, the morning had started like most others at Hospital St. Halsted. The automatic doors of the emergency department slid open at 6:47 a.m., letting in a gust of October air that smelled like rain and exhaust fumes. I stepped through, coffee in hand, the 3rd cup of the day already, and felt that familiar twist in my stomach that came with every shift. 3 months into my residency, and I still felt like an imposter every time I walked through those doors. "Dr. Coleman, you're early." I turned to find Dr. Vanessa Patel standing by the nurse's station, a tablet in one hand and green tea in the other. She was the attending on duty this morning, mid-40s, with black hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. 3 years as a trauma surgeon before switching to emergency medicine. Brilliant, demanding, and utterly unforgiving of mistakes. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Kept thinking about yesterday's case. The subdural hematoma? "He's fine. You made the call, we caught it." She tapped her tablet screen. "But if you're going to lose sleep over every case, you need a better coping mechanism. This job will eat you alive if you let it." I nodded. Knowing she was right but unable to shake the feeling that I was constantly one wrong decision away from catastrophe, the EO was already filling up. Richard, the homeless man who came in twice a week, a construction worker with a nail through his boot, a teenager with skateboarding injuries, his mother hovering anxiously. This was the rhythm of emergency medicine. Chaos and routine, intertwined. "Assignment for you today," Patel said, handing me a printout. "I want you taking point on anything that comes through triage. Full workup, initial assessment, treatment plan. I'll supervise, but I want to see how you handle decision-making." My chest tightened. "All of them?" "That's what taking point means, Dr. Coleman." A hint of a smile. "Don't worry. I'll be watching. If you're about to kill someone, I'll step in." That's reassuring. By 10 a.m., I'd seen 8 patients. My feet already hurt. The eye had settled into its mid-morning lull when my pager buzzed. "New arrival, Bay 7, Ramirez called out from triage. 34-year-old female, abdominal pain, nausea. I grabbed fresh gloves and headed toward Bay 7. Sarah Hendricks. Chief complaint: severe stomach pain x 3 days, worsening today. 3 days. That detail stuck with me. I pushed aside the curtain. Sarah was sitting upright on the gurney, one hand pressed against her abdomen, the other gripping the side rail. Her face was pale, her breathing controlled, measured. Pain in her eyes, yes, but also something else. Embarrassment? Fear? Standing beside her was a man I assumed was her husband. Tall, maybe 6'2", with thinning brown hair and glasses. He was wearing that polo shirt and had his phone in his hand, checking it every few seconds. "Hi, I'm Dr. Coleman," I said, extending my hand to Sarah first, then to her husband. "You must be Mr. Hendricks?" "James," he said curtly, barely glancing up. "How long is this going to take?" The question caught me off guard. "Well, that depends on what we find. She's been complaining about stomach pain for a few days. Probably just needs some stronger Tums or something." He finally looked up. "We've got a lot going on today." I had to cancel 2 meetings to bring her in. I felt a flash of irritation, but pushed it down. "Focus on the patient." "Sarah," I said, turning my attention fully to her. "Tell me about this pain. When did it start?" Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "Monday morning. I woke up with this cramping feeling, like bad period cramps. But my period isn't due for another week, so I thought maybe I'd eaten something bad." "Where exactly is the pain?" She moved her hand to her lower right abdomen. "Here." It started kind of in the middle, but then it moved over here on Tuesday. My internal alarm bells started ringing. Diffuse periumbilical pain that migrates to the right lower quadrant. Classic appendicitis presentation. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is the pain right now? Maybe .7? It was a 9 this morning. It's actually gotten a little better in the last hour. That was concerning. Sometimes when an appendix ruptured, there was a brief period of relief as the pressure decreased. But that relief was deceptive. Any nausea or vomiting? Yes. I threw up twice yesterday and once this morning. Haven't been able to keep anything down since Tuesday night. Fever? I felt hot yesterday. Didn't take my temperature though. I pulled my stethoscope from around my neck. "I'm going to listen to your belly, then press on it. Okay?" Sarah nodded, lying back carefully. I noticed how she moved slow, guarded, like any sudden motion might trigger more pain. I placed the stethoscope on her abdomen, listening in all 4 quadrants. Normal bowel sounds in the upper regions, but diminished in the lower right. When I palpated her abdomen, she was tender everywhere, but especially over McBurney's point. When I pressed down and released quickly, the rebound test, she gasped, her whole body tensing. "Sorry," I said softly. "I know that hurt." "What are you thinking?" James asked, still checking his phone. I straightened up, choosing my words carefully. "Based on the history and physical exam, I'm concerned about appendicitis. We need to run some tests to confirm, but this could be serious." "Appendicitis," James repeated flatly. "Like surgery serious?" "Potentially, yes. If the appendix is inflamed or ruptured, it needs to come out. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of complications." James's face hardened. "Okay, hold on. We need to talk about insurance first." Do you know how much surgery costs? We can't just— James, Sarah said quietly. Please. No, Sarah, we talked about this. We're barely covering the mortgage as it is. We can't afford a huge medical bill right now. He turned to me. Can't you just give her some antibiotics or something? I felt my jaw tighten. Mr. Hendricks, appendicitis isn't something that resolves with antibiotics alone. If the appendix ruptures, we're looking at peritonitis, sepsis, potentially life-threatening complications. I understand that, but we need to figure out the insurance situation first. Our plan has a high deductible. I need to call them, find out what's covered. Sir, I interrupted, I need to order some blood work and a CT scan first. Once we have those results, we'll know more about the urgency. How much does a CT scan cost? I blinked. I don't know the exact cost. You don't know? You're ordering it and you don't even know what it costs? Mr. Hendricks, I'm a doctor, not a billing specialist. My concern right now is diagnosing your wife, and my concern is not going bankrupt because of a stomach ache. Look, I'll call the insurance company. You do what you need to do, but don't schedule anything, no surgery, nothing, until we figure out what's covered. Understood? I looked at Sarah. Her eyes were closed now, her hands still pressed against her abdomen. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared on her forehead. I'll order the initial tests, I said carefully. But Mr. Hendricks, time matters with this condition. I get it, but I have responsibilities too. I'll be in the hallway making some calls. He walked out before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, feeling anger and frustration war with my training. Every instinct screamed that this woman needed immediate intervention. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. He's just stressed. We've had a tough year financially. You don't need to apologize. Let's focus on getting you better. But as I stepped out of Bay 7, I couldn't shake the cold feeling settling in my gut. The way her pain had briefly improved. The way she held herself so still. The slight gray tinge to her skin. I pulled up her chart and started entering orders. CBC, CMP, Lipase, lactate. CT abdomen and pelvis with contrast. Stat, you okay? Ramirez appeared at my elbow. Yeah, just ... I paused, looking back toward Bay 7. Something feels off. The husband's an asshole, she said bluntly. He's worried about money. I've been doing this 23 years, Marcus. I've seen this before. It never ends well when family members prioritize insurance over treatment. Ramirez crossed her arms. If I had to guess, her appendix ruptured hours ago. She's probably got a contained perforation, but it won't stay contained. She needs surgery. Soon. The cold feeling intensified. Dr. Patel should see her. She's in Bay 2 with a STEMI, but I'll page her. I nodded, turning back to finalize the orders. What if Ramirez was right? What if Sarah's appendix had already ruptured? The brief improvement in pain, the diffuse tenderness, it all fit with perforation and early peritonitis. But her husband was in the hallway, arguing with an insurance representative. I sent the orders through and walked back toward Bay 7. As I approached, I could hear James's voice through the partition, frustrated and growing louder. Double quotes ... Understand that this is an emergency, but I need to know what our out-of-pocket cost will be ... I pushed the curtain aside. Sarah's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing had changed faster, shallower. The monitor showed her heart rate had climbed to 118. Sarah, how are you feeling? Tired, she whispered. Really tired. That wasn't a good sign. Fatigue combined with tachycardia. Her body was working harder, but she had less energy. Classic early shock. I checked her blood pressure manually. 102/68. Not terrible, but lower than it should be. I'm going to start in 4 and get some fluids going. As I prepped the 4 kit, my mind was racing. Maybe I was overreacting, but I couldn't ignore what my gut was telling me. This patient was sicker than she looked. The 4 went in smoothly, and I started a liter of normal saline wide open. Sarah barely reacted to the needle stick, which worried me more than if she'd flinched. Try to rest, I told her. I'll be back soon. I found Ramirez at the nurse's station. Can you keep close eyes on Bay 7? Something's not sitting right. Already on it, the next 15 minutes felt like an hour. I moved between patients, but my mind kept drifting back to Sarah Hendricks. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the monitor board, checking her vitals remotely. HR 122, BP 98/64, temp 99.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The numbers were sliding in the wrong direction. When the lab results started populating, my stomach dropped. WBC 18,500 elevated, indicating infection. Lactate 3.2 borderline high, suggesting tissue hyperperfusion. Hemoglobin 11.2 on the lower end of normal. But it was the trend that worried me most. I pulled up her triage vitals from 30 minutes ago. Blood pressure then, 114/76. Heart rate, 104. She was getting worse and fast. I was about to head back when my pager buzzed. Dr. Patel, I found her emerging from Bay 2. Your STM is on the way to the cath lab. What do you need? Bay 7, 34-year-old woman with suspected appendicitis. But her vitals are trending down and her husband is fighting with insurance. Patel's expression darkened. Show me. We walked together to Bay 7. Inside, Sarah looked worse. Her face was ashen now, her lips slightly blue. The monitor showed HR 134, BP 86/58. Patel didn't waste time. She moved to the bedside, placed her hands on Sarah's abdomen, pressed down. Sarah didn't respond. That's when I knew. This wasn't appendicitis anymore. This was something much worse. Ramirez. Dr. Patel's voice was sharp. Get me an ultrasound, now. The nurse was already moving, pulling the portable machine from its alcove. I watched as she powered on the system, the screen flickering to life. Dr. Patel was palpating Sarah's abdomen again, methodically. Her fingers pressed deep, then released suddenly. Sarah's body jerked, a gasp escaping her lips even though her eyes remained half-closed. Rebound tenderness. But there was something else. The way her entire abdomen felt rigid beneath Patel's examining hands. Board-like, guarded. Marcus, what's your differential? Patel asked without looking up. My mind raced through the possibilities. Primary concern is appendicitis given the history. But with her current presentation, the hemodynamic instability, the deterioration, I'm worried about perforation. Her lactate is elevated. She's tachycardic and hypoten. AVA ... double creep. Keep going. Peritonitis. If the appendix ruptured, bacteria are spreading through the peritoneal cavity. That would explain the worsening vital signs, the generalized tenderness. I paused. But the timeline's bothering me. 4 days. Most perforated appendices present within 48 to 72 hours. So what else? Could be ectopic pregnancy with rupture, ovarian torsion, ruptured cyst, or internal bleeding from something else entirely. Patel nodded once. Ramirez arrived with the ultrasound, squeezing gel onto Sarah's abdomen. Patel took the transducer, pressed it below Sarah's ribcage. The screen showed gray and black shadows, the liver's smooth edge, and then, there, Patel said quietly. A dark anechoic stripe in Morrison's pouch. Free fluid, lots of it. She moved the probe to the left upper quadrant. More fluid, then to the pelvis. Even more, pooling in the rectuterine pouch. This isn't just a ruptured appendix, Patel said, her voice tight. This is massive hemiperitoneum. She's bleeding internally, and she's bleeding fast. My mouth went dry. From what? That's what we need to find out. But she doesn't have time for a CT scan. She needs to go to the OR now. Patel pulled the transducer away, wiped the gel off. Ramirez, call surgery. Tell them we have a patient hemorrhaging, ruptured AA, ruptured ectopic, or abdominal trauma, we don't know which. We need an OR immediately. On it. Ramirez was already reaching for the phone. Marcus, start another large bore 4, opposite arm. Get her typed and crossed for 6 units. Tell the blood bank we need O negative now. Activate massive transfusion protocol. I moved automatically, adrenaline dumping into my system. Large bore 4 kit, 18 gauge needle. Sarah's other arm was already cool to the touch, her veins thready. I found one in the antecubital fossa. Prep the skin, advance the needle, flash of blood. I was in. Dr. Coleman? I looked up. James Hendricks was standing in the entrance, phone still in his hand, confusion and irritation on his face. What's going on? Why are there more people? Your wife is bleeding internally, Patel said bluntly. She needs emergency surgery or she's going to die. We're taking her now. James's face went pale. Wait, what? Bleeding? From what? We don't know yet, but we don't have time to wait for insurance authorization. This is life or death, but I'm on the phone with them right now. They said they need to talk to a physician. Sir, Patel's voice cut through his protest like a scalpel. Your wife has liters of blood in her abdomen. Her blood pressure is 78/52. If we don't operate in the next few minutes, she will go into cardiac arrest and die. Do you understand? James opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time. Saw the way her skin had gone gray, the way her chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths, the way her eyes were glassy and unfocused. Oh my God, he breathed. Sarah? Mr. Hendricks, I said firmly. We need your consent for surgery. Right now. Yes, of course, whatever she needs. He looked down at his phone. I thought it was just stomach pain. I didn't know. Sign here. Ramirez thrust a tablet into his hands. James signed with shaking fingers, not even reading the text. Is she going to be okay? No one answered him, because we didn't know. The overhead intercom crackled. Dr. Patel, OR3 is ready. Anesthesia is en route. Let's move. Patel grabbed one side of the gurney. I grabbed the other. Ramirez disconnected the monitor cables, switching Sarah to portable versions. We wheeled her out of Bay 7, through the corridor, past other patients who stared. James followed a few steps behind, his phone forgotten, his face a mask of shock. The elevator ride to the second floor felt interminable. Sarah's monitor beeped steadily, her heart rate now 142, blood pressure 72/48. Every beat was her body screaming, trying to compensate. But there was only so much the body could do before it failed. Stay with us, Sarah, Patel said, checking the 4-line. We're almost there. The OR doors swung open. A team was waiting, scrub techs, anesthesiologist, surgical residents. Dr. Richard Torres, the on-call general surgeon, was already in scrubs, mask on, gloves ready. What do we have? He asked as we transferred Sarah to the operating table. 34-year-old woman, 4 days of abdominal pain, now in hemorrhagic shock. FAST exam shows massive free fluid, likely blood, vitals unstable. She needs an X-lap now. Torres nodded, already examining Sarah. Differential? Ruptured ectopic, unlikely given the volume. Ruptured spleen or liver from trauma? Spontaneous hemorrhage from a vascular malformation? Or, Patel hesitated, complicated appendicitis with erosion into a major vessel. Appendicitis doesn't usually cause this much bleeding. I know, but her history fits. We'll know when we open her. The anesthesiologist was already placing leads, starting medications. Pressure's dropping. I'm going to intubate. I watched as Sarah was given rapid sequence intubation drugs, as the tube was placed in her trachea, as the ventilator took over. Her eyes were fully closed now, her body limp. Family out, one of the nurses said, looking at James and me. I'm staying, James said, his voice desperate. I need to stay with her. Sir, you can't be in the OR. She's my wife, and we're going to take care of her, Torres said, his voice calm but firm. But we need space to work. Dr. Coleman will take you to the waiting room and keep you updated. I gently took James's arm. He resisted for a moment, staring at Sarah's motionless form, surrounded by masked figures and gleaming instruments. Then he let me lead him out. The doors closed with a soft hiss. In the hallway, James leaned against the wall, his hands covering his face. This is my fault. I should have brought her in sooner. She kept saying it was just cramps and I believed her. And then this morning when it got worse, I was annoyed that I had to miss work. I was mad at her for not toughing it out. Mr. Hendricks, I made her wait. We sat in the AIA for an hour while I argued about whether a CT scan was necessary. And the whole time she was bleeding to death. I didn't know what to say. because in some ways he was right. The delay hadn't caused Sarah's condition, but it had made things worse. But I also understood the fear of medical debt, the impossible choice between health and financial ruin. James Hendricks wasn't a villain. He was just a man trying to protect his family in a system that forced him to choose. "Let's get you to the waiting room," I said quietly. "I'll come find you as soon as we know anything." He nodded mutely, following me down the corridor. The surgical waiting room was on the 3rd floor. Uncomfortable chairs, outdated magazines, a TV on mute, a coffee machine dispensing lukewarm sludge. James sat by the window, staring out at the parking lot. "How long?" he asked. "Depends on what they find. Could be an hour. Could be 3 or 4. What if they don't find the bleeding?" "They will. Dr. Torres is one of the best. If there's a source, he'll find it. What if it's too late?" I sat down across from him. "The human body is remarkably resilient, Mr. Hendricks. Sarah's young. She was healthy before this. Those are factors in her favor." "I kept thinking about the money," he said, barely above a whisper. "The whole drive here, all I could think about was how much this was going to cost. We're already behind on bills. My company cut my hours last month. Sarah's been picking up extra shifts at the pharmacy. And now this ... He looked at me, his eyes red. "How much is this going to cost? The surgery, the hospital stay, the follow-up care? Thousands? Tens of thousands? I don't know. But Mr. Hendricks, right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is that your wife survives. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to get the bills." The bitterness stung. Because he was right. I wasn't going to get the bills. I would move on to the next patient while James Hendricks spent years paying off this single morning. "I know this system is broken," I said carefully. "I know it forces people to make impossible choices. But please, try to focus on Sarah right now. The bills will come later and you'll deal with them later. But right now she needs to survive." James nodded, but I could see the weight settling on his shoulders. I stood up. "I need to get back to the A. But I'll check in with surgery and come find you with updates." "Okay," he said hollowly. "And Dr. Coleman? Thank you for not giving up on her." I nodded and walked back toward the elevators. As the doors closed, I leaned against the metal wall and let out a long breath. My hands were shaking, delayed reaction to the adrenaline. I thought about my parents, about my dad working double shifts to pay for my college, about my mom clipping coupons so they could afford my textbooks, about the time I'd broken my arm in middle school and they'd waited 6 hours before taking me to the EA because they wanted to be sure it was really broken. I'd gotten into medicine because I wanted to help people, but more and more, it felt like I was just a cog in a machine designed to extract money from the sick and desperate. The elevator doors opened. The eyes stretched before me, patients waiting, monitors beeping. The endless cycle. I took a deep breath, pushed the anger down, and stepped back into the fray. The rest of the morning blurred into a haze. Bay 4, a 7-year-old with croup, stridor, retractions, dexamethasone, nebulized epinephrine. The mother hovering anxiously. Bay 8, a 58-year-old man with chest pain. EKG normal, troponin normal, most likely GERD. But we couldn't send him home without ruling out cardiac causes. Bay 10, a 16-year-old girl who'd taken too many of her mother's Xanax after a fight with her boyfriend. Suicide attempt or cry for help. Either way, we had to treat her medically and arrange a psychiatric evaluation. Every patient a story. Every story a crisis. And somewhere above us, Sarah Hendricks was fighting for her life while her husband calculated the cost of survival. I checked my watch. 11:47 a.m. Sarah had been in surgery for almost 90 minutes. No updates yet. I was documenting notes when Dr. Patel found me. "Marcus, I need you upstairs. Torres wants to brief us." My stomach clenched. "Is she? She's alive. That's all I know." "Come on." We took the stairs. Patel was silent, her face unreadable. Dr. Torres was at the nurse's station, still in his scrubs. There was blood on his gown, not a lot, but enough to show that the surgery had been complicated. "Vanessa," he said, nodding at Patel. "Dr. Coleman, what did you find?" Patel asked directly. Torres pulled up a stool, gestured for us to do the same. He looked tired. "Perforated appendix with erosion into the appendiceal artery," he said. The appendix itself had ruptured, probably 36 to 48 hours ago based on the tissue necrosis. But the rupture site happened to be right where the appendiceal artery runs, and the infection weakened the arterial wall. Eventually, the artery gave way. That's where the bleeding came from. I felt my jaw drop. "The appendiceal artery? That's rare," Torres finished. "Very rare. I've seen maybe 3 cases in my entire career. Usually when an appendix perforates, you get peritonitis, abscess formation, sepsis. But erosion into a major vessel? That's a surgical emergency that can kill within hours. How much blood did she lose?" Patel asked. "At least 2 liters, maybe more. Her hematocrit when we opened her was 22. We gave her 4 units during the procedure, and she's going to need at least 2 more in the ICU. Prognosis?" Torres paused, choosing his words carefully. "She's young and previously healthy, which works in her favor. But she's been sick for 4 days. She went into hemorrhagic shock, and there was significant peritoneal contamination. We did a thorough washout, removed the appendix, ligated the artery, checked for other bleeding sources. But she's at high risk for post-op complications. Infection, abscess formation, prolonged ileus, maybe RV if her lungs took a hit." "How long in the ICU?" "At least 3 days, maybe a week depending on how she does. Then another week on the floor if all goes well. And she needs 4 antibiotics for at least 2 weeks. I did the math. 10 days in the hospital, maybe more. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs could easily hit tens of thousands. Can I see her?" I asked. Torres nodded. "She's in SICU, bed 7. Still intubated, still pretty out of it. But she's stable for now. I need to tell her husband." "Good luck with that," Torres said darkly. I heard he was more concerned about insurance than his wife's life. "He was scared," I said, surprised at the defensive note in my voice. He didn't understand how serious it was. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Torres stood up, stretched his back. "People don't understand. They think stomach pain is just stomach pain. They wait, they hope it'll go away, they worry about the cost. And by the time they get here, what could have been routine has turned into life-threatening." He wasn't wrong, but the judgment in his voice bothered me. "I should go talk to him," I said. Torres nodded. "Tell him his wife is one of the lucky ones. If you and Vanessa hadn't caught it when you did, if you'd sent her for that CT scan instead of rushing her to surgery, she would have coded in radiology." The weight of that settled on me as I headed toward the ICU. We'd saved Sarah's life by minutes, maybe seconds. The SICU was on the 4th floor. I badged through, washed my hands, and approached bed 7. Sarah looked small in the ICU bed, surrounded by machines. The ventilator hissed and clicked. 4 lines ran from both arms. A Foley catheter bag hung from the bed, collecting dark yellow urine. Her face was pale, peaceful in unconsciousness. A nurse was adjusting her 4 medications. She glanced up. "You Dr. Coleman? From the A?" "Yes. How is she doing?" "As well as can be expected. Pressure's stabilizing now that we've got her blood volume back up. Heart rate's coming down. But Dr. Torres wants to keep her intubated overnight. We'll try to wean her off the vent tomorrow if her numbers look good." "Has her husband been up yet?" "Not yet. We usually don't let family in until the patient is more stable. But in this case, double quote, she shrugged. He can come up." I nodded and headed back downstairs. James was exactly where I'd left him, sitting by the window, staring at nothing. His phone lay on the chair beside him, screen dark. He looked up as I approached, hope and fear warring in his expression. "She's alive," I said immediately. "She made it through surgery." James's shoulders sagged. For a moment I thought he might collapse. "Oh, thank God. What did they find?" I sat down, explained as simply as I could about the perforated appendix, the arterial erosion, the internal bleeding. James listened, his face going through a dozen emotions. "So it was appendicitis all along?" he asked. "That's what was causing the pain." "Yes, but it had progressed much further than typical appendicitis. The infection was severe, and when the appendix ruptured, It damaged a blood vessel. That's why she was bleeding so much. And if we'd come in earlier, if I hadn't waited, I chose my words carefully. The timing was critical, but Sarah made it through, and that's what matters now. She's in the ICU, she's stable, and with time and antibiotics, she should recover. Can I see her? Yes, she's still unconscious and on a ventilator, so she can't talk, but you can sit with her. James stood up, then paused. Dr. Coleman. How much is all this going to cost? I met his eyes. I don't know. And right now, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Sarah is alive. Everything else you'll figure out later. Easy for you to say. You're right. It is easy for me to say. But Mr. Hendricks, your wife almost died today. She came within minutes of bleeding out. So yes, this is going to be expensive. Yes, you're going to get bills that seem impossible to pay. But you'll have time to deal with that. You can negotiate, set up a payment plan, find assistance programs. What you can't do is bring your wife back if she dies. James looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I just ... I've never been good at handling stress. I panic. I focus on the wrong things. Sarah always says I worry too much about money and not enough about what really matters. She sounds like a wise woman. She is. A ghost of a smile. Smarter than me, that's for sure. I gave him directions to the ICU and watched him walk toward the elevators. His shoulders were still slumped, his steps heavy with exhaustion, but there was something else too. A kind of determination. I hoped it would be enough. My pager went off as I was heading back to the EA. Another incoming patient, trauma alert, motorcycle accident, multiple injuries, ETA 5 minutes. The afternoon turned into a blur of controlled chaos. The motorcycle accident victim came in with a fractured femur, collapsed lung, and significant road rash. Then a kid who'd swallowed a button battery. Then a diabetic woman in DKA. Then a man with a COPD exacerbation. By 4 p.m., I'd seen 17 patients. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I'd eaten exactly 1 granola bar. But every time I had a moment to breathe, my mind drifted back to Sarah Hendricks, to her husband arguing about authorization codes while she bled out, to the surgeon's words, she's one of the lucky ones. Lucky because she'd survived, but how many others weren't lucky? Dr. Coleman. I looked up. Dr. Patel was standing in front of me, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me. You look like you need this. Thanks. I took a sip. It was terrible, burnt and bitter, but it was caffeine. Patel sat down beside me. For a moment, we both just sat there in silence. You did good work this morning, she said finally. With Sarah Hendricks. You caught it early, you moved fast. You didn't let her husband's insurance concerns delay treatment. That's what saved her life. I almost didn't. I almost ordered the CT scan. I almost let him talk me into waiting. But you didn't. You trusted your instincts. That's what makes a good doctor. What about the system that made him worry more about insurance than his wife's health? What about the fact that they'll probably be paying off this hospital bill for the next 10 years? Patel was quiet for a moment. You can't fix the system, Marcus. Not today. Probably not in your lifetime. The system is broken in ways that are bigger than medicine. But you can't let the brokenness stop you from doing your job. Which is what? Taking care of the patient in front of you. That's it. We can't solve healthcare inequality. We can't make insurance companies less greedy. We can't prevent people from delaying care because they're worried about money. But we can treat the patient who walks through those doors, regardless of their ability to pay. We can give them the best care we're capable of, and we can fight like hell to keep them alive. She stood up, drained her coffee. The rest, the bills, the bureaucracy, the broken system, that's for them to deal with after they survive. Our job is to make sure they survive. Got it? Got it. Good. Now get back to work. We've got a waiting room full of people who need help. I watched her walk away. Then I stood up, threw my empty cup in the trash, and pulled up the next patient chart. The work continued. At 6 p.m., I got a text from the ICU. Sarah was waking up. They were planning to extubate her in the next hour if her respiratory status remained stable. I finished with my current patient and headed up to the 4th floor. The ICU had a different energy in the early evening. The day shift nurses were handing off to the night shift. The lights were dimmed slightly. Sarah's bed was surrounded by people. Dr. Torres was there, along with the ICU attending, 2 nurses, and a respiratory therapist. And James, standing off to the side, watching anxiously. I hung back, but Torres spotted me and waved me over. "Dr. Coleman, just in time. We're about to extubate." Sarah's eyes were open now, though still glassy from sedation. The ventilator settings had been turned down, letting her do more of the breathing work herself. Her oxygen saturation was 97%, her respiratory rate 16, her blood pressure finally back to normal. "Okay, Sarah," the respiratory therapist said. "We're going to take this breathing tube out. When I say go, I need you to take a big breath in and cough as hard as you can. Okay?" Sarah nodded weakly. "Ready? 1, 2, 3, go." The therapist deflated the cuff and pulled the tube out in one smooth motion. Sarah coughed, gagged, coughed again. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. "James?" He was at her side instantly, taking her hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. What happened? You were really sick. You had appendicitis, but it was worse than the doctors thought. You needed surgery, but you're okay now. You're going to be okay." Sarah's eyes found mine. "Dr. Coleman?" I stepped forward. "Hi, Sarah. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." A weak smile. "Thank you for not giving up. You don't need to thank me. Just focus on resting and getting better." She nodded, her eyes already closing again. James looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. I know I was difficult earlier, but thank you for saving her anyway. That's what we do," I said simply. Dr. Torres caught my eye and gestured toward the door. We stepped out into the hallway. "She's got a long road ahead," Torres said, "but I think she'll make it. The next 48 hours are critical. We need to watch for signs of infection, abscess formation, any residual bleeding. But if she makes it through the weekend without major complications, her prognosis is good." "And the financial side?" Torres grimaced. "Between the visit, the surgery, the ICU stay, the medications, the follow-up care, they're looking at a bill somewhere in the 6 figures. Even with insurance, their out-of-pocket could be 30–40,000. I felt sick. For one day? For one complicated surgery and a week-plus hospital stay, yeah. Welcome to American healthcare." He clapped me on the shoulder. "But hey, she's alive. That's worth something, right?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's worth everything." I headed back to the EO for the last 2 hours of my shift, my mind churning with questions I couldn't answer. The weekend passed in a haze of shifts. Saturday morning, I was back in the at 7. Different attending doctor. Marcus Hendry, but same chaos. Chest pains and broken bones and drug overdoses. I checked on Sarah between patients. Saturday morning, stable but sedated, antibiotics running, labs improving. Saturday evening, awake but in pain, asking about when she could go home. Sunday morning, fever spiked to 101.3. We got a CT to rule out abscess. Found some residual fluid collection, adjusted her antibiotics. Sunday evening, I was documenting notes when my pager buzzed. "SICU. Sarah." I ran. When I burst through the IQ doors, Sarah's bed was surrounded by people. But this time, the energy was different. No controlled efficiency. This was panic, barely contained. "She's hypotensive. Pressure's 68/40, one nurse called out. Heart rate 156. Temperature 103.2. Septic shock, the ICU attending said grimly. "Start a 2-liter bolus, draw blood cultures, get me a central line kit." I pushed closer. Sarah looked worse than she had 2 days ago. Her skin had that gray-green tinge of severe infection. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, her eyes half closed. James stood in the corner, arms wrapped around himself, face white. "What's happening?" "She was fine an hour ago." "Mr. Hendricks, we need you to step out," a nurse said firmly. "I'm not leaving her." "Sir, we need space to work, please." I caught James's arm and let him out. Behind us, I could hear the organized chaos of a team fighting septic shock. "What's happening?" James demanded. She was getting better. She was talking, eating. She's developed an infection, I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. That's the risk with any abdominal surgery, especially with peritoneal contamination. Bacteria can seed in the surgical site, in the abdomen, in the bloodstream. She's septic. Is she going to die? I wanted to lie, but I couldn't. I don't know, I said honestly. Septic shock is serious. If they can't stabilize her blood pressure, if the infection has spread too far, if her organs start to fail. I trailed off. They're doing everything they can. This is my fault. James's voice was barely audible. I waited too long. I should have brought her in on Monday or Tuesday, but I kept telling her to tough it out, to wait until we could afford it. And now she's dying because of me. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is. His voice rose. I chose money over my wife's health. I made her wait while I argued with insurance. His voice broke. I might have killed her. I didn't know what to say, because in some ways, he was right. But James wasn't the villain. He was a victim of the same system. Mr. Hendricks, I said carefully, the healthcare system in this country is designed to make people afraid of seeking care. It's designed to prioritize profit over patients, to make medical treatment so expensive that people delay until it's too late. You're not responsible for that. You were just trying to take care of your family in the only way you knew how. But Sarah is fighting for her life right now, and she needs you to be strong for her. Not guilty, not blaming yourself, just strong. I gripped his shoulder. Can you do that? He nodded, wiping his eyes. Yeah, I can do that. We stood in the hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Other families passed by, visiting their own loved ones. The hospital continued its endless rhythm around us, indifferent to our vigil. Finally, the ICU attending emerged. Dr. Lisa Chun, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with a reputation for medical miracles. She's stabilized, Dr. Chun said without preamble. For now. Her blood pressure responded to the fluids and pressors. We've got her on 3 broad-spectrum antibiotics. We're sending her back to CT to look for an intra-abdominal abscess. What's the prognosis? I asked. Touch and go. If we can identify and drain any abscesses, if the antibiotics can get ahead of the infection, if her immune system can kick in, she might pull through. But septic shock has a mortality rate of 30 to 40%, even with aggressive treatment. James's face crumpled. 30 to 40%? Mr. Hendricks, your wife is young and was healthy before this. Those are factors in her favor. But I won't lie to you, this is very serious. The next 24 hours are critical. Can I see her? Once we get her back from CT, yes. But she's sedated again. We had to re-intubate her. She won't be able to communicate. James nodded numbly. Dr. Chun gave his shoulder a brief squeeze and disappeared back into the ICU. I stayed with James until they brought Sarah back from CT. The scan showed a small fluid collection near the surgical site, not a large abscess, but enough to serve as a reservoir for bacteria. Interventional radiology was called to place a drain. How much is all this costing? James asked suddenly. We were sitting in the surgical waiting room again. I don't know, I said. More surgery, more procedures, more days in the ICU, more medications. He laughed bitterly. We're going to lose everything, aren't we? Even if she survives, we're going to lose our house, our savings, everything we've worked for. There are payment plans, financial assistance programs, medical bankruptcy if it comes to that. Medical bankruptcy. He shook his head. 6 months ago, we were doing okay. We had a little savings. We were thinking about buying a bigger house, maybe having kids. And now ... He gestured helplessly. Now we're going to spend the rest of our lives paying off the cost of keeping Sarah alive. And you know what the really fucked up part is? I'm sitting here thinking about money while my wife is fighting for her life. What kind of person does that make me? It makes you human, I said quietly. It makes you someone living in a system that forces you to think about money, even in the worst moments. You're not wrong for worrying. The system is wrong for making you worry. Fat lot of good that does me. No, I agreed. It doesn't. We sat in silence. Then James said, tell me about her chances, honestly. Honestly, I said finally, I don't know. I've seen patients sicker than Sarah who walked out of the hospital 2 weeks later. And I've seen patients who looked fine 1 minute and coded the next. Medicine isn't as predictable as we'd like it to be. Sarah has good doctors, good nurses, good care. But ultimately, it's going to come down to whether her body can fight off this infection. That's not very reassuring. I know, but it's the truth. James stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the darkening sky. Sunday evening. Tomorrow, people would go back to their ordinary lives. But James Hendrix's life would never be ordinary again. If she dies, he said softly, I'll never forgive myself. If she dies, I said, it won't be because of anything you did or didn't do. It'll be because sometimes, despite our best efforts, people die. That's not your fault. That's just the reality of being human. I should have brought her in sooner. Maybe, but you can't change the past. Mr. Hendrix, all you can do is be here for her now. He nodded but didn't turn around. I left him there, standing at the window, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. Monday morning arrived with rain, a cold October drizzle that turned the city gray. I wasn't scheduled to work, but I came in anyway. I needed to know if Sarah was going to make it. The ICU was quieter during the day. Sarah was still intubated, still sedated, still fighting, but her numbers were better. Heart rate 98, blood pressure 112/68 without pressors, temperature 99.1. The abscess drain was in place, collecting yellowish fluid. James was asleep in the chair beside her, his head tilted back, his hands still holding hers. I stood in the doorway, not wanting to disturb them, just watching the ventilator breathe for her, watching the monitors trace her heartbeat, watching James's chest rise and fall. Dr. Coleman, I turned. Dr. Chun was standing behind me, a tablet in her hand. Her labs are improving, she said quietly. White count is down, lactate is normalizing, kidney function is stable. The drain is putting out good amounts. If this trend continues, we might be able to extubate her again tomorrow. That's good news. It is. But she's not out of the woods yet. We're still watching for secondary complications. And even if she recovers from the acute infection, she's going to need weeks of 4 antibiotics, possibly home health care, definitely close follow-up. More costs, I said. Dr. Chun's expression tightened. Yeah, more costs. Tuesday, Sarah was extubated again. This time, it stuck. She was weak, in pain, still running a low-grade fever, but she was breathing on her own, talking in whispered fragments. Wednesday, she was transferred out of the ICU to a regular floor. Thursday, I stopped by her room on my way into my evening shift. She was sitting up in bed, picking at hospital food. Dr. Coleman, she said, her voice still hoarse but stronger. I heard you've been checking on me. Just wanted to make sure you were on the mend. Thanks to you. James told me you're the one who realized I was bleeding, who got me to surgery in time. If you HN single quotes, ... She swallowed hard. Thank you for saving my life. You're welcome. But the credit goes to a lot of people. It was a team effort. Still, thank you. I nodded. Then, carefully, how are you feeling about everything? Sarah's smile faded. You mean the bills? Yeah, we got the first statement yesterday. Just from the A and the initial surgery. $60,000. And that doesn't include the ICU stay, the second intervention, the medications, any follow-up care. She looked down at her hands. We have insurance, but our deductible is $12,000. And then we're responsible for 20% of everything after that. James did the math. Even in the best case scenario, we're looking at $40,000 or $50,000 out of pocket. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It's just, we don't have that kind of money. We've got maybe $8,000 in savings. We could take out a loan against the house, but we're already stretched thin. I don't know how we're going to do this. Have you talked to financial counseling? The hospital has programs. We make too much to qualify. Not much, but just enough to put us over the threshold. So we're stuck in this middle ground where we can't afford the care, but we also can't get help. She laughed without humor. It's funny, you know. I work at a pharmacy. I see people every day struggling to afford their medications, making choices between prescriptions and groceries. I never thought I'd be one of them. There might be other options. Payment plans, negotiating the bill. James is already working on it. But even with a payment plan, we're talking about years of debt. And if anything else happens, if I get sick again, if James loses his job, if we have an emergency, we'll have nothing to fall back on. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw resigned desperation, the look of someone who knew they were trapped. "I'm alive," she said softly, "and I'm grateful for that. I really am. But I also know that being alive is going to cost us everything we've worked for. And I don't know how to feel about that." I didn't have an answer for her. "I'm sorry," I said again. Sarah nodded. "Me too." Friday afternoon, my shift was ending. I'd been on my feet for 12 hours straight. But I had one more stop to make. Sarah's room was quiet. James was there, working on his laptop. Sarah was sleeping, her breathing deep and regular, her color finally returning to normal. "Mr. Hendricks," I said softly. He looked up, closed his laptop. "Dr. Coleman, they're saying she might go home in a few days. That's great news." "Yeah, home with a PICC line for 4 antibiotics, home health nurses, follow-up appointments every week, physical therapy because she's so weak." He set the laptop aside. "But home, that's something. How are you doing?" James was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've been thinking a lot this week about what you said in the hallway, about the system being broken. And you're right. But I've also been thinking about my part in all this." He stood up, walked to Sarah's bedside, looked down at her. "I spent days telling her it was no big deal, that she was overreacting, that we couldn't afford to go to the doctor for every little ache and pain. And even when we got here, I was more worried about the bill than about her. I made her feel like her health wasn't worth the cost." "Mr. Hendricks." "No, let me finish." He turned to face me. "The system is broken, but I also failed her. I should have taken her seriously. I should have prioritized her health over our bank account. Instead, I almost let her die because I was too worried about what it would cost. You didn't let her die. She's here, she's alive, she's going to recover." "No thanks to me. That's not true. You brought her in. You signed the consent forms. You stayed by her side. You did what you needed to do." James shook his head. "I don't know if I can forgive myself, Mr. Hendricks," I said finally. "I've seen a lot of families in this hospital. I've seen parents who can't afford their kids' cancer treatments. I've seen elderly couples choosing between medications and rent. I've seen people rationing insulin, dying because they couldn't afford the care they needed. You're not unique in struggling with these choices. And the fact that you feel guilty, that shows you care. But that doesn't change what I did." "No, but it might change what you do next." I paused. "The system that made you choose between your wife's health and your financial security, that system isn't going to change unless people like you speak up, unless people share their stories, unless they demand better, unless they vote for policies that prioritize people over profit. You have a platform now. You have a story that could help others." James was quiet, considering. "You really think one story could make a difference?" "I think every story makes a difference. Medicine isn't just about what happens in hospital rooms. It's about policy, advocacy, social justice. And the more people understand how broken the system is, the more pressure there is to change it." "I'll think about it," James said. "Right now I just want to get Sarah home, get her healthy, and then we'll see." I nodded. "That's all anyone can ask." I left them there, James returning to his laptop, Sarah sleeping peacefully. As I walked through the hospital corridors, I thought about everything I'd learned during my first few months of residency. I'd learned that medicine was as much about navigating systems as it was about treating disease, that even the best clinical care couldn't overcome barriers of cost and access, that patients didn't just need doctors, they needed advocates. They needed a healthcare system that worked for them. I'd learned that sometimes you could do everything right and still watch patients suffer, that the Hippocratic Oath's promise to do no harm was more complicated than I'd imagined when the harm came not from medical error but from a broken system. And I'd learned that the work of being a doctor extended far beyond the exam room. It meant speaking up when policies hurt patients. It meant advocating for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. Sarah Hendricks would survive. She'd go home, recover, eventually return to work, but she'd carry the burden of medical debt for years, maybe decades. And there were millions of others like her, people who'd been forced to choose between health and financial security. I couldn't fix that system alone, but I could be part of the fight to change it. I could tell stories like Sarah's, advocate for policy changes, vote for leaders who prioritized healthcare access. And I could keep doing what I'd done for Sarah, catch the cases others might miss, push through bureaucratic barriers, fight like hell to keep patients alive. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was something. I stepped out into the parking lot, into the cold October rain. The hospital loomed behind me, its windows glowing with warm light, each one a story of suffering and resilience. I thought about my grandfather, dying because he was afraid of ambulance fees. About my parents, working multiple jobs to keep us healthy. About every patient who delayed care, rationed medications, suffered in silence. Sometimes heroes don't wear white coats. Sometimes they're just people trying to survive in a system designed to exploit them. Sometimes they're patients who fight through pain. Sometimes they're families who stay by hospital beds through long nights. Sometimes they're doctors who refuse to give up, who push through barriers, who remember that behind every chart is a human being who deserves care. And sometimes, when we get lucky, when we move fast enough and fight hard enough, we save a life. Not because the system worked, but because we refused to let the system win. That was the lesson Sarah Hendricks taught me. Not about appendicitis or surgical technique, but about the moral imperative to fight for patients, especially when the system makes that fight as hard as possible. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove home through the rain. Tomorrow I'd be back at the hospital, back in the AA, back to the endless cycle of patients and crises. But tonight, I'd sleep knowing that Sarah Hendricks was alive, and that was worth everything.